Thanks, John. Good morning, everyone. I'm Stephen Parapellic, today's worship associate. Very happy to be with you. Before we begin, there are just two announcements to share with you this morning. The first is come for a walk at the Right Lock Farm. Please meet at the new building parking lot on Thursday, August 26th at 3:30 for a walk for all age groups. For more information, please contact Naomi Magnoni. And next, at next week's service on August 22nd, we will join the Ware lecture to hear Stacey Abrams, and Desmond Meade. Details to follow, including a link. Please be reminded, of course, to check out our latest edition of Highlights, which was emailed to us on August 12th to be aware of all the other wonderful things happening within our congregation. As always, for more information about congregational news or events, please also visit our website. If there are any first-time visitors with us today, you should know that summer services are led by members of the congregation with support from our summer minister. Today, WUS member Matthew Bronsky and chaplain Kai Flannery are leading the service. And now let us open our hearts and minds to the spirit of worship. Hello again. The Winchester Unitarian Society is a welcoming, caring community devoted to spiritual growth, social transformation, and environmental responsibility. Guided by Unitarian Universalist principles and the diverse traditions of many faiths, we live our values through worship, reflection, connection, and service. Here we welcome all, people of all racial and ethnic backgrounds, people of all sexual orientations and genders, people of all incomes and abilities, people of all beliefs, and people with religious questions. We know you are here for different reasons: to find community, to seek your spiritual and personal truths, to question, to nurture your heart and soul, to be nurtured, to explore new ideas, to find comfort, and perhaps to find the answers to some of your bigger questions. Right after our first reflection, families with young children will be invited to transition to another Zoom room to visit with Miss Juanita, our nursery leader, for story time. I will post that link in the chat box when it is time. Now we will take a moment to greet one another through the chat. And if you have some especially good news, we invite you to share it. We will be called back to worship through the ringing of the bells at our partner church in Maros-Washahe, Transylvania.
Our opening words this morning come to us from Alice Walker's The Color Purple. I am an expression of the divine, just like a peach is, just like a fish is. I have a right to be this way. I can't apologize for that, nor can I change it, nor do I want to. We will never have to be other than who we are in order to be successful. We realize that we are as ourselves unlimited and our experience is valid. It is for the rest of the world to recognize this if they choose. Have you ever found God in church? I never did. I just found a bunch of folks hoping for him to show. Any God I ever felt in church, I brought in with me. And I think the other folks did too. They come to church to share God, not to find God. I now invite Stephen to light our chalice.
This morning, the words for lighting our chalice come from the Unitarian community of Rio de Janeiro. We light this flame as a reminder of our mission of being a light in the world, in unity with those who came before us, with whom we are a spiritual family. We shall be able to commit to the building of a community of free faith beyond geographical limits and personal beliefs. May we be a shelter to all who need it the most. Amen. Now, please join in singing our opening hymn, Come, Come, Whoever You Are.
Though you've broken your vows 1,000 times,
come, come, whoever you are, wonder, worship, mother of Eve, ours is no fairer than all despair. Come, yet again, come, 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 whoever you are, wonder, worship, mother of Eve, ours is no fairer than all despair.
Our first reflection today comes from what I think is one of the great all ages books of all time, and really one of the best-selling books of poetry of all time. I hope JJ knows this book. It's called Where the Sidewalk Ends. And we're going to read the title poem in this book of poetry, Where the Sidewalk Ends by Shel Silverstein. And, you know, JJ, a journey like walking down the sidewalk can be literal, like exactly where it says. You walk down and you stop wherever the sidewalk ends. But it can also be a metaphorical journey that it means it represents something else. So tell me, when you listen to this, do you think it's just walking down the sidewalk and stopping where it ends, or do you think maybe it means more than that to you? And the beautiful thing about poetry, one of the beautiful things is it means whatever it means to you. And to me, it means much more than that. But tell me what you think. Where the sidewalk ends. There is a place where the sidewalk ends and before the street begins, and there the grass grows soft and white, and there the sun burns crimson bright, and there the moonbird rests from his flight to cool in the peppermint wind. Let us leave this place where the smoke blows black and the dark street winds and bends. Past the pits where the asphalt flowers grow, we shall walk with a walk that is measured and slow, and watch where the chalk white arrows go, to the place where the sidewalk ends. Yes, we'll walk with a walk that is measured and slow, and we'll go where the chalk white arrows go. For the children they mark, and the children they know the place where the sidewalk ends.
Thank you, Matthew. Younger members of the congregation are now invited into a separate Zoom room with Miss Juanita, As you go to your Zoom room, we will sing you out with a blessing.
May the light within you shine before you every day, every day. May the light within you shine before you, guide your way, guide your way. May the love we share surround you and chase your fears away. May the light within you shine before you. This we pray, this we pray.
Well, friends, led by Matthew this morning on a journey, which will involve Joseph Campbell and the power of myth. It's important for us to notice that any journey we take into the unknown, we don't take alone. We take with our friends and our community along with us. And so this comes to the time in our service where we can share our joys with one another on whatever journey we happen to be on this summer. So I would invite you, if you have something that you'd like to share with others, inviting them in to witness your journey right now. This is a great time for that. And I will light a candle for you for each of our thoughts and concerns. And if you want to raise a hand, or if you want to raise a hand in the Zoom room, that's also a good way to do it. I will have to unmute you, I think, because that's the way it works.
Hi, I'd like to share a sorrow of losing my Aunt Kathy 5 years ago this month, but also share the joy of all the joy she brought me and so many others in her life.
Thanks, Matthew. I feel like working on this service with you, I have gotten to hear about her personality and some of her gifts to the world. Thank you. Yeah. And I'm sorry, yes, I'm sorry for the loss of her, for her community and her family. Yeah, Lee.
Okay, I want to share a joy. Yesterday was a wedding. It was a wedding for Becca Newhouse, who was raised in this church and whom I have known since before she was 1 year old. And it's great. She's married a wonderful guy. It was a terrific service.
Oh, joy. Thank you. That lifts my heart. Thank you, Lee. Congratulations to Becca and her family and her new husband. Is there anything else that might be coming up this week? I feel like I will say I got to see two friends that I didn't get to see all through COVID because they work in healthcare. And yeah, it's been a challenge just wanting to let those folks rest and not expose them to any more germs. And we finally got together after a year. We're just like, well, I guess this may not be going away, but we are going to still get together. And that was a real blessing. So I light a candle for that. For my two social worker friends who bring light to the world. Anybody else? Yeah, Nancy. Ooh, hang on.
I ask for prayers and blessings for my brother who has Parkinson's and refuses to be vaccinated. And the turmoil it places the family in who want to help him and yet have to protect themselves and their children. There's no solution, but your goodwill would be appreciated.
Thank you, Nancy. You have it. You will send it to your family and to your brother. I'm sorry that situation is happening for you all right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, and just hope for a resolution to that makes it easier in some way.
Mhm.
Thank you, friend. Anybody else? Oh, Kim. Yeah, hi. Oh, did that work? Here we go.
There, okay. I would like to share a joy. My 12-year-old grandson plays summer baseball in the Bay State League. And yesterday they won their semifinal game. And tonight they are playing in the finals at 7 o'clock in Winchester. He plays for Reading. So I will be on a baseball field at 7, and I hope everyone will wish his team well.
We do. We wish them well. They have our thoughts and our.
It's the championship game.
May good things happen.
Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, that's so nice. Also, just to be able to see sports and be in that community gathering space. Yeah, Betsy, please.
I'd like to report that I saw Beth O'Donnell yesterday. And for those of you that have been members of the church for a while, Beth and her husband, Ken, and family moved here in 2004. I saw a picture of her yesterday. She's been on the standing committee for our church and has been involved for a long time. She continues to fight the cancer that has bothered her for so many years. So I am asking you to send your thoughts, maybe cards, your love and prayers for Beth O'Donnell. Thank you, Kyle.
Thank you, Betsy. Prayers for Beth. Prayers and hopes. Thank you. Our good thoughts and our hopes for comfort and for just a feeling of being held go out to Beth O'Donnell. And thank you for being with her right now and visiting with her. If we have any others, will you lift your hand? And if not, I will light a candle for the joys and sorrows that remain unexpressed for us, that this community holds with us today. Thank you, friends. So on every journey, as we work our hardest and walk the steps we need to walk and take our path, we also need our times of rest and silence. I know that many times I find my idea of myself may be defined by what I do or don't do, and that can affect my sense of belonging or dignity, what I achieve. So I invite you this morning to just take some moments here in each of our individual journeys to not expect anything particular from ourselves. To give ourselves some moments of positive regard, some nourishment on this journey that we're on. If you would like to, you could close your eyes and focus on your breath. Or perhaps you like to sit and contemplate. Perhaps this is a time for you to connect with a higher power, or just connect with your chair and your feet on the ground. Here in this moment, I invite you to hold your experience lightly and with kind attention. And now let us move into a time of silence together. With gratitude to you for showing up on this journey today, with gratitude to each of you who accompanies yourself and accompanies many others. Please join us now in singing our centering hymn, I've Got Peace Like a River.
I've got peace like a river. I've got peace like a river. I've got peace like a river in my soul. I've got peace like a river. I've got peace like a river. I've got peace like a river in my soul. I've got joy like a fountain. I've got joy like a fountain. I've got joy like a fountain in my soul. I've got joy like a fountain. I've got joy like a fountain. I've got joy like a fountain in my soul. I've got love like an ocean. I've got love like an ocean. I've got love like an ocean in my soul. I've got love like an ocean. I've got love like an ocean. I've got love like an ocean in my soul. I've got pain like an arrow. I've got pain like an arrow. I've got pain like an arrow in my soul. I've got pain like an arrow. I've got pain like an arrow. I've got pain like an arrow in my soul. I've got tears like the raindrops. I've got tears like the raindrops. I've got tears like the raindrops in my soul. I've got tears like the raindrops. I've got tears like the raindrops. I've got tears like the raindrops in my soul. I've got strength like a mountain. I've got strength like a mountain. I've got strength like a mountain in my soul. Oh, I've got strength like a mountain. I've got strength like a mountain. I've got strength like a mountain in my soul.
Today's reading is from The Power of Myth by Joseph Campbell. It is by going down into the abyss that we recover the treasures of life. Where you stumble, there lies your treasure. If you can see your path laid out in front of you, step by step, you know it's not your path. Your own path you make with every step you take. That's why it's your path.
Given the popularity of public television series like Sesame Street, This Old House, and Masterpiece Theater, it might surprise you to hear that one of the most popular series in the history of public television is a series of 6 one-hour-long interviews with 2 guys sitting in a quiet room discussing comparative mythology? What? I'd heard of the power of myth and vaguely thought it had something to do with mythology and spirituality, but I had never actually watched or read it. And frankly, I hadn't really read that much mythology. I'm not really sure why, but 2 summers ago, I Googled it, found it online, and watched it on my phone late at night after the kids had gone to bed as I was cleaning up the kitchen each night. In those quiet late night sessions, watching The Power of Myth at the kitchen sink, I was completely fascinated and enamored with it. I watched each episode over and over, even listening to it over and over again on long car rides alone. I found it to be so thought-provoking, contemplative, and so deeply spiritual in a way that's not didactically religious, in a way that didn't tell me exactly what to think, as my own religious upbringing in another faith did, but that really made me think deeply and contemplate my own thoughts on spirituality. It both quenched a spiritual thirst that I didn't even know I had, and it also made me even thirstier for more. I yearned to discuss all that I was watching and reading in The Power of Myth with others who were similarly interested. So I formed a book group here at Winchester Unitarian Society and discussed it with many of you, 1 chapter episode a month over the course of about half a year. In The Power of Myth, Professor Joseph Campbell observed the uncanny similarities in the general plot lines of many myths across many very different and disparate cultures in both time and place. He termed this phenomena the monomyth. He termed the plot line the hero's journey, and he termed the thousands of hero protagonists in these myths the hero with 1,000 faces. The myths that follow the same basic hero's path plotline range from ancient cultures in Mesopotamia, Greece, Egypt, and Rome, to the Middle East, to India, to the Far East, to tiny islands throughout the Pacific Rim, to Aztec, Eskimo, and Native American cultures here in the Americas, and back to Europe again, from Celtic legends and Arthurian legends in the British Isles to Norse legends in Scandinavia, really all around the globe and all across the centuries. At first, this seems counterintuitive. How could so many cultures and so many different and disparate places possibly share the same general plot line for the myths that are most central to their unique individual cultures? Campbell taught us that these myths are not just great stories of challenging journeys. Rather, these myths are metaphorical journeys to help guide each of us on our own challenging journeys, both literal and figurative, throughout our own lives. If we think for a moment of individual myths as individual stars, Campbell taught us both to see the constellations, that is, the connections between them, and even more importantly, he taught us how to use these stars, how for thousands of years these myths have provided individuals with a star-like reference point on which to set their compass in a sea of uncertainty and guide themselves through light. Why doesn't the plot line of the hero's journey vary across time and space and culture? Well, because none of the following changes or varies across time, place, and culture. The innate challenges of any human in navigating life's difficult transitions from childhood through adolescence to adulthood to parenthood to mentor and elder to death. The fact that neither we nor the mythological heroes typically succeed entirely on our own. We almost always have help from others along the way. And the fact that the human psyche does not change. And by that, I mean our innate hierarchical needs for food, shelter, safety, love, and fulfillment. Our longing to understand some greater meaning in our own lives beyond the ordinary and tangible world we see every day around us. and our own fears and apprehensions, especially of the unknown, death and loss, and our challenge to overcome them. None of that changes across time, place, or culture. Excuse me. The hero's path that Campbell described, and I'm going to share, if I can, a diagram of that now. Just a little thumbs up if you can see that. Describes the basic metaphorical plot line for all these myths and those various challenges and journeys along the way. So you can see it starts just to the right of that hiker feature. There's some sort of call to action, call to adventure. There's a threshold and often a great reluctance at first to cross it from the world of the known into the unknown, the fear, the apprehension. The protagonist crosses, and then there are many challenges and temptations along the way. But the protagonist is helped out by various people along the way, by mentors, sometimes by strangers. Often at the depths of challenge and desperation, there's an abyss, and is out of the abyss that transformation occurs, either physical or figurative in these myths. Redemption, atonement, a return from the world of the unknown back into the known, but a return that is transformed and brings our hero back and concludes the story. So that hero's journey, so many thousands of years old, persists today, I would say as strongly as ever in our own beloved contemporary myths. From The Lord of the Rings to Star Wars to Harry Potter, these all follow the plot line of the hero's journey. George Lucas famously said he never could have made Star Wars were it not for Joseph Campbell. One challenge that confronts heroes in many myths across different cultures, from ancient Greece and Rome throughout medieval Europe to heroes in contemporary myths, again, like Lord of the Rings and Harry Potter, is the dragon. So why? Why did we need to imagine the dragon? And why is this mythical creature so widespread around the world? In almost every different ecosystem around the world, there are already real-life ferocious creatures that can kill a human. Why did we need to collectively dream up yet one more? The dragon. While the lion, the great white shark, the polar bear, etc., are all the apex predators and most fearsome creatures of their own domains, the dragon is the master of all domains and all four elements thought to comprise the ancient world: earth, air, fire, and water. It can fly. It can dive beneath rivers and seas. It walks on land. It dwells inside the earth in a cave. It breathes fire and is immune to fire. It is the master of all domains, and it is the most fearsome and impossible of all creatures to slay. Anyone who slays a dragon is a hero, a legend for all time to come, because these dragons terrorize not only individuals, but entire villages in Western mythology. According to Campbell, so what does the dragon represent in Western mythology? According to Campbell, it represents the hardest thing of all for we humans to slay or conquer. It represents ourselves. It represents our own inner fears, anxieties, despair, and grief, our own inner faults, such as selfishness. Thus, when we slay the most fearsome creature of all, we have looked inward and slayed our own inner fears and inner faults. We have slayed our own dragons. The introduction to the power of myth sums this up beautifully. The hero path. We have not even to risk the adventure alone, for the heroes of all time have gone before us. The labyrinth is thoroughly known. We have only to follow the thread of the hero path. And where we had thought to find an abomination, we shall find a god. And where we had thought to slay another, we shall slay ourselves. Where we had thought to travel outwards, we shall come to the center of our own existence. And where we had thought to be alone, we shall be with all the world. Our own personal paths and challenges may not be as heroic as those of Hercules or Minerva or King Arthur or Harry Potter. I know mine are certainly not. But Campbell tells us that the same hero's journey plotline applies to all the individual journeys that we each make at many times in our own individual lives. I can now look back and relate the hero's journey plotline to so many different times I've gone through at various points in my life, and I'm sure you can do the same. These all involved a call to action, fear of the unknown, initial reluctance, crossing a threshold to begin that journey, literal or figurative, receiving help from others along the way, and then emerging after a low point, transformed in some way through self-confidence from meeting a challenge. A few examples: the fear and apprehension of starting in a new school, especially middle school or high school, that difficult time when we were transitioning from childhood through adolescence to young adulthood. For me, I vividly remember being scared out of my wits before the first day of high school, because going from elementary school to junior high had been such a rude awakening for me. The older kids at the junior high were just bigger and meaner and nastier than anyone in elementary school, and there was so much egregious bullying and bad behavior. I now expected that this was the natural progression up the public school ladder as kids got older, and hence high school would be even worse than junior high, which was pretty hard to imagine. I remember walking into the cafeteria the very first day of high school at lunchtime, a bit panicked, staring at a huge, noisy sea of students, kind of quickly trying to scan the crowd while walking in, looking for a familiar face. I saw a table of some other freshman boys I kind of recognized and timidly asked if a seat at their table was taken. They welcomed me and we all sat together at the very same table. Not only that intimidating first day, but all year. It became kind of a support group for all of us. And to my pleasant surprise, high school was actually a lot better than junior high. The high school kids were generally more mature, and as a result, were just plain nicer than the junior high kids. A second journey of mine came with the excitement and the apprehension of setting out to backpack around Europe for a summer. It's a rite of passage for college kids of all kinds, but especially for architecture students like me. Of course, there was lots of excitement. I'd never been to Europe, and neither had my close friend Chacon that I traveled with. Our doubt and our apprehension came from doing this back in the days before cell phones, before the internet, before our American ATM cards worked in Europe, before the euro, where we had to change currency every time we crossed a border, which was every few days. Not to mention the challenge of carrying everything on your back for an entire summer, from little Ziploc bags of laundry powder to do your laundry in bathroom sinks every couple days, etc. And the challenge of stretching a shoestring student budget to last the better part of a summer. Traveling with a very close friend allowed us to figure things out together and provided constant support to each other, especially in difficult and trying situations. I remember a low point early in the summer of arriving by train, totally exhausted, very late at night to Munich, finding that every hostel was already full for the night. Our budget simply didn't allow for a single hotel the whole summer, and then being roused by some very aggressive German police with billy clubs when we fell asleep exhausted on a bench in the train station. Working our way through challenges and low points like that, and then having many wonderful days immediately after a low point, gave us the confidence to keep going. Both the challenges and joys of backpacking together that summer with my good friend Chacon solidified a deep and enduring friendship like no other than my spouse. He's been my best friend for the past 30 years, and now our kids are close friends. Campbell is well known for his many inspiring quotes in The Power of Myth, and two that summarize those first two journeys for me are these: all things at first appear difficult, Chinese proverb. And a bit of advice given to young Native Americans at the time of their initiation. As you go the way of life, you will see a great chasm. Jump. It is not as wide as you think. The confidence I gained from those two rite of passage journeys really helped me to undertake other challenges later in life with greater confidence, like finding and starting my first job after college, and years later, on very short notice, moving for a year to a country where I didn't speak the language at a time when we just had a newborn baby and we had 1,000 things going on. A couple years ago, I gave a New Year's One Precious Life reflection at WUS about how incredibly transformative that year in Italy was for me, how so many Italians really went out of their way to help me, a stranger and an immigrant who barely spoke their language. The true treasure I gained from that year abroad was realizing the kind of close-knit community that I was part of there and wanted to be part of here, and realizing the kind of person I really wanted to be, which is the type of person who goes out of their way to help strangers along on their own journeys, as so many Italians had helped me. My initial apprehension at the practical and logistical challenges of moving abroad, but the figurative treasure I gained from that year makes me think of my favorite Campbell quote of all and the centering thought for today. The cave you fear to enter holds the treasure you seek. That quote also brings me to the last personal journey I'd like to share today. I grew up south of Boston in the same town where my mother and her 10 siblings grew up, and where my grandmother still lived, in that same small house where she raised 11 kids. I have about 40 first cousins on my mother's side of the family alone, and we're all very close. It's a very large, very tight-knit Irish Catholic / Albanian family. 5 years ago this month, I was at a local elementary school playground with my kids when my cell phone rang, and I received the kind of call no one ever wants to receive, the cave we all fear to enter. It was my sister telling me that our beloved Aunt Kathy, my late mother's last living sister, and the matriarch of our Gallagher family clan had been shot and killed by a stranger at her own front door on the quiet residential street in Huntsville, Alabama, where she had lived for many years. I went through the first few stages of grief, shock, disbelief, denial, anger, you name it, on that first phone call. My wife's mother graciously came to stay at our house and take care of our 7 and 4-year-old children, so Aaron and I could fly to Huntsville to be together with family for several days to comfort each other in that most horrific time. I would not have thought of grief as a hero's journey, but I now realize that the entire journey of grief to Alabama, both literal and figurative, followed the exact same plot as the hero's journey. Receiving a call, reluctantly crossing a threshold and setting out on a journey, descending into an abyss, in this case, an emotional one, but encountering people who helped me along the way, helpers and mentors to emerge from the abyss. I knew my family would help each other through the grief of a funeral. We always did. We'd been through many before, although none quite this raw, none quite this shocking. Our family did comfort each other by talking not about her death, but about her life, and about all the times she made us laugh, all the outrageously funny things she said, all the advice she had given us. I was a bit surprised that it was equally comforting for me to meet and talk to people I didn't even know, coworkers, friends, and neighbors of Kathy, but who also knew her well and who knew her as exactly the same person I did and loved the same things about her. Her sense of humor, her boisterous, gregarious personality. They had their own stories to tell about her that I'd never heard before, but that clearly could only have been Kathy and vice versa. But the thing that surprised me most, and perhaps the thing that touched and comforted me the most, came from total strangers, people I never met and probably never will meet, and who had never even met my aunt. Huntsville is not a big city, but it is big enough to have its own evening newscast. So what happened to my aunt was very big news that everyone knew about. As we were driving in the large funeral procession from the church to the cemetery, emotionally at the bottom of the abyss, I saw strangers pull over it to the side of the road, get out of their cars, and stand and face the procession and hold their hands over their hearts as we drove past. I'd never seen this before or since, and it just touched me and comforted me beyond words to know that a total stranger would do that, to say, I feel for you. My heart goes out to you. That gesture of empathy by strangers really helped pull me up from the abyss of my grief, the deepest, darkest point of the cave I had feared to enter. In a way, those strangers were kind of like the kids who welcomed me to to their table in the cafeteria that intimidating first day of high school. And they were also kind of like the Italians who went out of their way to help me during my year of living in Italy as an immigrant. All were at various key moments. They were there at various key moments to offer help. Perhaps the one thing that made that funeral procession gesture different is that it happened to come when I was at the absolute bottom of the abyss, and thus was most meaningful to me. The final Campbell quote I'd like to share is this: It is by going down into the abyss that we recover the treasures of life. Where you stumble, there lies your treasure. Before I left on this journey to Huntsville, I wouldn't have thought there could possibly be any treasure in entering that cave. I now realize that the small treasure I brought back was the realization that the hero is not solely or even primarily the protagonist on the hero's journey. The equal or greater heroes are those who help the protagonist on their journey, literal or figurative, and especially those who lift them when they stumble. And the true treasure is realizing that we can all be those heroes to others, even to total strangers, by helping others along their journey, especially when they stumble. Thank you.
Thank you, Matthew. A weekly offering is an opportunity of dedication, a time when we live our values through acts of generosity. In this way, the offering is a spiritual practice, a collective affirmation of our shared values and our commitment to the mission of this liberal religious congregation. Here are the ways you can easily donate to the Winchester Unitarian Society. Through giving online on our website, using the smartphone app called Give Plus, through PayPal, or simply by writing a check and mailing it to the Society at 478 Main Street in Winchester. Please write or type the date of your offering in the memo line or comment field. Our practice is to invite first-time worship attendees to be our guests. So in lieu of a contribution, please complete the virtual visitor card so we can stay connected with you beyond this Sunday. The offering will now be generously given and gratefully received. Those who wish to do so are invited to join in reading together our community affirmation. We gather not for ourselves alone, but to use our common power to build the beloved community within and beyond these walls. We create and reaffirm this covenant this day, to make justice flourish, to practice compassion amidst difference, and to embody transformative love. Let us now join in singing our closing hymn, Blue Boat Home.
May we spend some time today and wonder at the paradox of our journeys individually and collectively, at the beauty of casting our questions into the deep. May we know what it takes to be the hero of a story and to support the other heroes in our lives. As we move forward, encourage as a character in our own story and in the stories of others. As we hold the beautiful image of that sunken cathedral rising in our hearts, I invite you to also hold these words that I see every Sunday in this room with me. Words of architect Sambo Mockbee, proceed and be bold. And where we had thought to slay another, we shall slay ourselves. Where we had thought to travel outwards, we shall come to the center of our own existence. And where we had thought to be alone, we shall be with all the world. May it be so, friends. Amen.
Please join in reading together the words for extinguishing our chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. This service has ended, but our life of service continues. And as we acknowledge and thank Matthew and others who made today's service possible, let us continue our conversation in the chat. After a few minutes, we'll go into randomly assigned breakout rooms for unmuted conversation. And then at about noon, possibly a little bit sooner, we will all be invited back into the main room for a conversation with Matthew about his reflection. And I think Dennis Brett will help facilitate that discussion when we go back into the main room. Thanks, everyone.